Oh, whoops. Hi. I said hello. It's lovely to be with you all. And let's get started.
Mia, did you want to jump into the agenda? Or you want me to start with office updates?
Let's start with office updates.
All right. Good evening, everyone. And we do apologize again for some of the technical difficulties. I will just remind everyone, this is our first time ever hosting a hybrid meeting for the monthly Commission on Sustainability meetings, and we're still working out some of the technology, and we do apologize for the delay, but we really appreciate everyone for attending and being here this evening. To start, we wanted to provide just a recap of what happened over the past month with the Office of Sustainability, and particularly during our open house on June 21st last month, we were able to announce the city's LEED Gold certification. Very excited about that accomplishment. And we were really fortunate and felt really fortunate to have Mayor Scott there at the announcement during the open house, and to have that be such an exciting and big accomplishment that we highlighted. Our LEED certification really highlights some of the major climate progress and focus that the city has, in all the investments and efforts that we've supported over the past few years. So Amy, I don't know if you want to say it. I'm sorry if you all can't hear me very well. Amy, did you want to say anything else about the LEED Gold certification? All right, and it may be hard to switch audio with folks.
She does not want to say anything else.
No problem. We are really excited about kind of this time that we're in as it relates to climate and sustainability for the city. This year, we're really looking forward to completing our climate action plan, as well as our disaster preparedness plan, which are just further indications of all the progress that we're making on climate action across the city. We also have a new team member to introduce to you all today. Our team is expanding and we're getting positions filled. So our new environmental planner for forest conservation, who actually replaced Amy's old position, is Rachel Whitehart. And so Rachel, perhaps if you're in person, you can come on camera and show yourself and just introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Okay, come over here.
Sure. Am I unmuted? No. Hi, I'm, as Ava said, the new environmental planner. I'm taking over forest conservation and landscape manual reviews from Amy. And just a brief background, I am an engineer by training. I've done a lot of work in the Baltimore area for various consulting firms, and
I think it looks like the boardroom folks, you all are muted. So we lost that audio. We can't hear anyone.
I'm so sorry. I told her it was unmuted. Rachel's the new planner. She's taking over landscape review from Amy, which is great for Amy and great for all of us. She has a background as an engineer and has done a lot of consulting in the city. I'm not going to make her walk across the room again. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome to the team, Rachel. I hope I look forward to folks, our commission members and folks meeting and working with her in the future. As I mentioned, we are, and as many of you have heard and you'll continue to hear, we're updating the city's climate action plan this year, which will be our roadmap to carbon neutrality. And we'll be having an event this fall on October 4th to seek public comments on draft recommendations for the plan. So Valerie, did you want to share more about that event? And we'll drop a link in the chat so people can have that to register and share among your networks.
So I'm sorry, there's a little breakup here on this and I apologize. I heard half of that. I heard my name.
Oh yes, I was just mentioning the climate action plan event.
Oh, okay, yes. So we will be having a climate action plan event on October 4th. It'll be a public comment meeting if you need them during the public comment period. So we are making a toolkit that we will be sending out to different community associations, city council offices, and so on to get the word out. Right now, we also have a link up, and we've been sending different flyers and materials around to different neighborhoods about signing up for just to be notified for the public comment period. So that'll be coming up in October. We will be sending it to the commission, and at the October meeting, discussing that the draft plan with you then as well. And later on this week, the DP3, we will have a meeting for that. That's actually tomorrow night. That will be in person. It's at the National Aquarium office on Fayette Street. So there's information on the website. I'll pop some in the chat too. If anyone would like to come, it would be great to have your input. And, you know, also if there's anyone you can spread that around to your network, we'd love to see a great showing there. It's in person, but there will be a hybrid option as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Valerie. So those are all the updates that we have from the offices. And so I'll pass it back to you, Mia, to talk about the co-chair process.
Absolutely. Thank you. So today is the very last meeting of the longest serving co-chair in the history of the Commission on Sustainability, Miriam Avens. This is, yeah, you're getting applause here. I don't know if you can see that, and then many smiling faces, because what a feat. And so we have this great agenda that has been prepared by Miriam and the team. But before we go into the agenda, for those where this is maybe your first meeting, and you should know a little bit of history. The first plan was adopted it started in 2009, and then in 2019, the current sustainability plan that we are following and managing that process was adopted, and Miriam was the co-chair then. We created, and Miriam created many of the processes that co-chairs and the commission, since the commission didn't really exist before then, setting up those practices and those standards, and looking at what a lever of creating a commission that engages with the public and engages with government and highlights and lifts up many of the needs of just sustainability in the city. And so we have had a great time looking at governance to get the job done, looking at the infrastructure that's needed, doing that all through a lens of equity and a practice that really reflects the values that are in the 2019 plan. And so we've worked really hard to uplift voices and communities and practices throughout the city that have oftentimes before this commission gone, you know, kind of unknown. And so we hope to continue that practice in the future. And so we have created this process. Many of the commissioners know we have a few people that have we had an open nomination process. This selection process is new because we need to nominate a co-chair to go to the mayor for appointment. And we have, Miriam, you're gonna have to help me out here because I think we have one candidate.
Correct.
Okay, so commissioners who are online, we have Amy just sent out a link so that you can have your vote there and we can record your vote. Jared Lyles has accepted the call for nomination to be co-chair for the commission. So our goal is to have one co-chair who is has gone through the process for a while, and then have a new co-chair to cycle off for a term. And that way we do not have new people being co-chairs at the same time, so that no one has to endure what Miriam had to create, and it can be a smooth and easy process. So Miriam, while this was not smooth and easy to honor you with all of this, I believe that in the room you have some citations from the council and from the mayor to thank you for your service as the longest serving co-chair of the commission.
And
I'm being very specific in that term.
I'll get out of the
because-
speaking chair.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Councilwoman Ramos here. I'm on the agenda for later, but I thought I would take the opportunity also to honor my constituent, Miriam Abrams for just really everything that she's done for the Sustainability Commission and for sustainability as a field in Baltimore, right? We really honestly wouldn't be here with the commission and with this work without her. So I'm really grateful
Take a
that
picture.
she stuck with it for so long, right? And really thanks to all of you for doing the work. So I'm going to read the mayor's citation, and she'll get a separate one from me later, and you'll have to excuse me. I need to put on glasses. The City of Baltimore Certificate of Recognition on behalf of the people of Baltimore. Mayor Scott, I'm not Mayor Scott, but am pleased to present the certificate to Miriam Avens in recognition of nearly 12 years of committed service on the Baltimore City Planning Commission, City Commission on Sustainability. During your tenure, you have been a model leader on climate change, sustainability, urban greening, and equity. On behalf of the people of Baltimore, I offer my sincere thanks for your service and wish you the best in your future endeavors. Signed, Brandon Scott on July 19th, 2023. Fancy certificate. So Miriam, thank you very much for everything that you've done.
Yes, thank you, Miriam, so much for all your service and support of the commission.
It's,
been really amazing.
It's been being on the commission has just been kind of exemplifies how leadership in Baltimore around sustainability can grow, because I got my start here by starting a community garden in my neighborhood, trying to provide some leadership around community gardens within the city, and then engaging at a policy level. So I think it's a great example of how in Baltimore, when we look at sustainability, we're looking at how do residents, how do organizations build that sustainability, not just what can government do. And so I'm so pleased and proud to have been in all three of those states, you know, just a private resident, starting an organization, and serving on a government commission. And, you know, I'm a bad penny, so I'll be back one way or another.
Miriam, thank you for everything. So, so as a commission, we have to take a vote on who to nominate for mayoral approval. And Ava, you have to let me know if that language is appropriate.
Yep, Mia, that is accurate. We're voting on a recommendation to provide to the mayor's office, just to clarify that that's final decision sits with the administration.
Fantastic. And so at this point, we just have one name. And so that is Jared Lyles. And so if we can, I think, have the link that was sent out for commissioners for you to just have your vote recorded there on this process. And then for those commissioners, I believe that we have both Donzel and Ben in the room there, and Miriam. If you all are able to just use that link as well, that way that can help us out with a kind of a quick vote process, that would be really helpful. And then I think that we are ready to move into the rest of the agenda.
I'm sorry, Mia, I'm not understanding where that link is. Is it it's the Google form at the very top?
Yes.
Thank you. But in the meantime, should I start the rest of the agenda?
Yes, please. I mean, you can probably
Okay.
vote any.
Well, in May, we had, I'm gonna just angle this a bit so I can look at the room as well. In May, we had a really great meeting where we went over some of the plans that are guiding our work, particularly on climate. So the Climate Action Plan, the Disaster Preparedness and Planning Project, DP3. We looked at also the Coming Comprehensive Plan and how that focuses on sustainability. And of course, there's the sustainability plan. And this month, we're kind of continuing that by looking at how does some of this get done in practice? Like, as I said, it's not just what government does. It's what many actors do. We are actually focusing on government right now because it's different parts of government working together and having impulses that sometimes brings us to making the progress that we need. So we're going to be looking at two projects today, and I want to just interrupt myself and ask, is Councilman Conway on WebEx at this time?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll continue the
Yes.
introduction.
I see his name on the
Great.
He is here.
Okay, great. So we're looking at two things. One is we know that adapting to climate change will cost a lot, and we're going to be looking at governance models on how do you get that work done, which is an issue that Councilman Conway has been very involved with. And then we're going to look at an issue of inland flooding that Councilman Ramos has been very involved in. And we also have Councilman Burnett on WebEx. And I believe that he's going to add to the inland flooding conversation. So both Councilman Burnett and Councilman Ramos have responded to constituent concerns around inland flooding. And there's been a lot of work done among different agencies at the behest of Councilman Ramos and I believe Councilman Burnett as well, that has brought together so much data that we have a much better picture of what's going on and gives us a tool to kind of look at land use more comprehensively. So we're going to hear about that right now, starting with the governance. And basically we're looking at what does good governance look like in the context of resilience and climate goals. And first, we're going to hear from Eileen Singleton. So Eileen, get ready to pop up here.
She went out to go do this over WebEx.
Is she on?
That's what I'm.
Okay, first, I believe we're going to hear from Eileen Singleton. She's the principal transportation engineer at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. She joined them in 1998. She's on WebEx, that's confirmed. Yay. Eileen supports projects and committees that enhance safety, security, reliability, efficiency, and equity of our transportation network in the region. And we're going to get some context from her. Then we're going to have additional context from Ava Richardson. We're going to hear from Councilman Conway. And I'm going to ask you all to be, let's see, what time are we at? I'm going to ask you all to be just as brief as you possibly could be, about, 5 minutes each, I think, if we're going to get through our agenda. So thank you. Eileen, over to you.
And Eileen, I know you just entered, you just had to re-enter the meeting. It looks like you're muted. If you are speaking, we cannot hear you, but you should be able to share your screen. Drop us a note in the chat if you're having any technical difficulties.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got my video. Okay, and share my screen. Okay, so can you see just the presentation now?
Yes, we can. Everything looks great.
Okay. Thank you.
If it's possible for you to speak a little louder, that would be helpful for us in the room.
Okay, yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen Singleton with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, and I'm going to give you an overview of our regional resilience activities, and my colleague Sarah Tomlinson will also speak on a couple of the slides. So first I'll give an overview of BMC, and then an overview of our climate resilience work, and hopefully this is relevant and of interest to you all. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Baltimore Metropolitan Council. So we are a private nonprofit organization that works with the jurisdictions shown here: Baltimore City and Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Carroll, Harford, Howard, and Queen Anne's counties. Our board of directors includes the mayor of Baltimore City, and executives from our member jurisdictions, as well as a delegate and senator from the General Assembly and a gubernatorial appointee. We have a variety of work. Most of our staff is involved in transportation planning, but we also do economic and demographic research, mapping, air and water quality analysis, cooperative purchasing is, we have just one person who does it, but she does a lot and brings a lot of value to the region. And we have some other work. Our webpage has more information. So we have quite a few committees. We have a lot of transportation planning committees as well as other committees. And the work, some of the work I'm going to talk about today comes out of our Transportation and Public Works Committee. And then Sarah will talk about some of her committees. So under the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, we have the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board, which is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization to oversee regional transportation planning. So BMC staff serves as the staff to the BRTB, and the Transportation Planning Board members are almost the same as the BMC, although we also include the City of Annapolis. We don't have the General Assembly members, but we have the Maryland Department of Transportation, Environment Planning, Maryland Transit Administration, and a representative from a locally operated transit organization. And so to get an overview of some of the environmental resilience work that we're doing, you can use this link to see a story map, which has an overview of our long-range transportation plan, Resilience 2050, our short-term transportation plan, the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, and our air quality conformity analysis, which lists some emission reduction strategies on the story map that you can get the link to when the presentation goes out. And our BRTB will vote on these 3 documents next week. So an overview of our specific climate resilience work. We have, for electric vehicle infrastructure, we haven't done anything yet, but we have, this is a snip from our Unified Planning Work Program, which is the work that the staff does, and we are going to be issuing an RFP, I think in the next month or so, looking at studying support for electric vehicle charging station infrastructure in the region. And the staff person who's leading that is Anna Marshall. And so I don't have much more information than is here, but as the scope gets developed and the RFP goes out, you can look for that or contact Anna if you're interested for more information. The area that I am most focused on are some climate resilience documents that we've been working on over the last several years, focusing on, yes? Oh. Focusing on providing some guidance to
Me and mine have like a
DPWs
little bit of an overlap, but not as much as I thought it was gonna be.
Councilman, you need to mute.
We have the documents, the work that I've been doing has been focused on providing support to our local DPWs and DOTs and how they can work towards preparing for adaptation. So the first documents I'll show you, this is a snip from our webpage. And the first resilience documents that we worked on are a climate change resource guide, which also incorporates a climate change adaptation toolkit. And so this is an overview of the resource guide. It focuses on 6 areas under DPW and is also focused on adaptation. The table of contents for the document is here, and there are 6 chapters. It goes from providing an overview of how the past climate in the region and projections in chapter 2. Chapter 3 has a compilation of climate change impacts that have taken place already. Chapter 4 looks at policies. to support adaptation. Chapter 5 has some adaptation options and strategies, and Chapter 6 is funding and financing. And so with each of the chapters, there's a toolkit that has a couple questions to support the chapter and help people who are using the guide sort of get more out of it and think about what they're focusing on. So toolkit questions for the changing climate section. We have these 2 questions, which I won't go over because I know I need to go quickly, I think. Climate change impacts. We have a couple of questions. Policies. We have 1 question. So the idea is just to get people to think. I put a little more information on Chapter 5, climate adaptation options, because I think there's a lot of good information in here. It's kind of a compilation of adaptation strategies. As you can see, it's broken down by hazard type, multi-hazard, changes in temperature or changes in precipitation, sea level rise, coastal storm surge, and flooding. And we also try and assign it to the different service areas and the functions that it would support. And so this is just 1 page from that. And then the adaptation options. Okay. So let's see, I know I have to speed along. So this other project is climate resilience guidance for local jurisdictions, which is taking that climate change guide to the next level. And this is all on our webpage, but our focus was to try and provide just more information to the DOTs and DPWs in using these documents and identifying strategies and getting more information onto the strategies. Another document that we worked on recently was recommendations for interjurisdictional coordination. And so that was looking at the need to coordinate at a high level across jurisdictions. There are some recommendations in there. And Sarah, I know I was going to have you come in, but since I'm moving quickly, I'll just say that, so Sarah is the contact for the reservoir protection. The information's on our webpage, and if anyone has information, contact Sarah. So just to wrap up, we have 2 regional proposals. We recently, Sarah was the lead for BMC staff putting together a proposal to the EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. And that just went in a couple weeks ago. And she worked with folks in the jurisdictions to put that together. And I am working with Sarah and others to put together a proposal to the PROTECT program to develop a regional resilience improvement plan, which is a good way to move forward with supporting interjurisdictional coordination. So there you go. That was really fast. So if anyone has questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much. That is an awful lot of material, and I appreciate your condensing it. Do we have any questions at this time? Or actually, I think what we're going to do is move on to Ava Richardson, who's going to give us a little more context. We'll have all our speakers, and then we'll have a little time for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Eileen, for that overview of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council's kind of recommendations for how local governments can pursue climate change initiatives. What I'm going to talk about kind of will set a broader picture for what does it mean to support good governance practices for a changing climate. And I think of this in terms of 3 primary buckets. The first one is funding. The second one is governance, and the last is implementation. And I'll share exactly what the city is doing in each of those buckets. From the funding perspective, Eileen shared some of the federal funding options that are out there right now. The city has participated in the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which will allow the city to compete for $4.6 billion in competitive grants in 2024. In addition to that, on last Friday, Vice President Kamala Harris was actually in Baltimore to announce $20 billion nationally being released to support clean energy projects, as well as a tremendous amount of other historic funding that is supported through the Infrastructure Reduction and Jobs Act, IIJA, as well as the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. Our Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development, they have been supporting the submission of several different funding opportunities under this historic level of funding. In addition to that, we have investments kind of like across city government, both from an operational perspective that support this work. Obviously, we have the work or the staff that are supported within the city's Office of Sustainability. But a lot of that investment is coming from some of these federal funding sources. But there's definitely an opportunity to kind of take a broader look and perspective at how any city or local government funds its work and how it leverages its current capital and operating budgets to think more strategically about how those funding or how those investments can be leveraged for, again, our changing climate, meaning that we're investing more in climate mitigation and adaptation. The second bucket being governance really looks at how we're organizing this work across the city. So in the city, our Office of Sustainability, our team, we sit within the city's Department of Planning. You may see in some other city governments, Office of Sustainabilities may sit within the mayor's office, that there may be departments of the environment or departments of environmental protection. There's different governance structures that are set up to support this type of work, to support the implementation of climate mitigation and adaptation across local governments. So it's important, that's just an important consideration to keep in mind. How the work is organized is critical from the perspective of the types of leadership and resources and how that work is carried out. We will hear from Councilman Conway today to talk about resilience authorities and kind of how that as a particular governance structure can support bolstering some more investments in climate change, climate mitigation and adaptation. And so I'm going to use that as a segue to go into the last piece, which is implementation, because while we have definitely governance structures in place across city government already, we also have a lot of plans across the city that relate to climate mitigation and adaptation. And so kind of within those two buckets of governance and implementation, as you have heard again, and again, we'll continue to hear, we are updating the city's climate action plan, which will be our climate mitigation plan, or will be a plan that really expresses how we will reduce greenhouse gases across the city. That reduction of greenhouse gases, we suspect will also have an improvement on air quality when we reduce emissions generally from various sources across the city, but also other environmental benefits as those emissions decline. Our disaster preparedness plan is the city's climate adaptation plan. So that really looks at what we are doing to prepare for stronger winds, more flooding, more extreme heat, and to ensure that communities and facilities, infrastructure is able to adapt as that climate change. And as we know, we are going to experience more and more severe weather patterns across the region. So our governance structures, from my perspective across the city, are robust because we have these plans in place that really set us up very well to go after some of these competitive funding opportunities across the city. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for exploring how or reapproaching how some of those things are approached. So when it comes to implementation, it's kind of a combination between those funding sources. How do we leverage that funding, both the public, the private funding sources, as well as other potential philanthropic funding opportunities? And how do we leverage our governance structures to implement the plans, implement those goals that we have outlined in those plans? So that's just some ways that we can think about how we approach this work. And across the city of Baltimore, a lot of our work as it relates to climate and sustainability is implemented across different agencies, including our Department of Public Works colleagues, who you'll hear from this evening, colleagues within our Department of Recreation and Park, Department of Transportation, and others that all have different functions that relate to infrastructure, that relate to critical mitigation and adaptation goals across the city. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass things to Councilman Conway to share about the bill, to share about his work on resilience authorities.
Thank you, Ava. And I'll try to be brief. I think it's important to sort of frame how I've generally looked at this issue, and hopefully how, from the council's perspective, we've weighed in and done all that we can to help make sure that the city is on the right track, moving on the right trajectory. Of course, one of the first things we did as a council during this council was we set goals in partnership with the Office of Sustainability. we updated our goals to fit what we were seeing happen across the country and what cities were setting as goals for reducing greenhouse gases and setting targets not only for the city and what we expect that everything will mean, but also very strict targets for city government. And I think, you know, we as a city should always lead. We can't put things out there that we, you know, wouldn't follow for city government ourselves. And so we both put the city government to task and also put the city to task. I think that's been a big move, and I think an important signal that you know, the city council is in lockstep with our climate goals and what we need to accomplish more broadly. That said, I think we've also been very targeted, noting all the conversation that we've had thus far around limited funding, limited capacity, budget shortfalls, and all the other things that create pressures for prioritizing some of the climate considerations that we're trying to have an impact on. We've been trying to, well, I know I've been really trying to think about ways that we can make steps in the right direction without either any costs or any significant costs. And some of the things we've done has been like focusing on cool roofs. It's you know, requiring cool roofs for flat roofs seems in many ways like a no-brainer idea. For flat roofs across the city, you never see them. Yet they do have a huge impact on energy usage during the summer and for community heat during the summer as well. So having reflective roofs or solar roofs or green roofs can have impacts on heat, on energy usage, and on stormwater when you start to factor it in. And for the simplest of options, just having a reflective roof can, it literally costs nothing extra. It's just changing the color or reflectiveness of your roof. So things like that go a long way. And through law, we've made some changes there already. And we continue to look at other ways that we can think about making sure that the city is continuing to think about the future in a way that you know, is comprehensive. That said, we also have unquestionably significant infrastructural changes that need to happen. We talked about extreme storms. We've talked about flooding in our neighborhoods. We haven't talked about it, but it falls right into it. Sea level rise and the impact that it may have on our businesses on the Inner Harbor. We've talked about heat. There's so many things that are going to really change the way that we live and operate within our city, and we're seeing some of that now. Some of the things that maybe I hadn't even thought about when we started talking about some of these pieces, like air quality and how forest fires in Canada can have an impact on air quality here in Baltimore. So one of the things we're really thinking about so far as infrastructural changes is a resilience authority. This is a new tool that we can use to fund infrastructural projects throughout the city. A resilience authority has only been recently approved as of 2 years ago by the Maryland General Assembly, and there are only 2 resilience authorities in the country at the moment, one being Charles County, which was the first to launch their resilience authority, and then the second being the resilience authority, a joint resilience authority between Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis. What it does is it allows the entity, which in their structure is a separate quasi-government entity, to leverage the city's bonding authority to raise money and to pay for projects throughout the city. This is going to be really important for us as a city. As I mentioned earlier, we have tight budgets. And as we're thinking about how we prioritize, you know, schools or safety or health implications across the city, sometimes it's hard to choose the longer term investments that will have significant benefits over time. And so the concept of having an entity that strictly focuses on that is actually quite meaningful. We, interestingly, speak of the day, just passed a bill out of committee that will then go to second reader to do a study on what the structure of that resilience authority may be. So as I mentioned, there are only 2 that exist now. Both have decided to structure them as external entities, quasi-government entities that operate on their own and determine what projects they feel like are of the greatest use to the jurisdiction, and they execute on those projects. these projects can be anything from planting trees to increase the tree canopy, to doing stormwater projects, which is some of what Charles County has done, to thinking about the impacts of sea level rise, as I know the Resilience Authority in Annapolis is really thinking about, as the Annapolis dock area floods regularly during certain times of the year. So, we have many opportunities, many things that we need to address, and only so many sources of funding. We want to be creative, we want to be flexible, we want to be thoughtful about where that money is going, and the hope is that we can find a way to make sure that a Resilience Authority, if that is the route for us, is a viable option and is used effectively.
Thank you so much. We have at least one question in the room, and I think we're just going to start there. Denzel. Can you hear Denzel? Come on over.
So the question I have is, you said that you wanted to, or you had hope that the money gets to the communities in the right way. Is that hope through a procurement process? And what would that procurement process be for something like a local CDC or community organization?
Is that a question for me? I just want to make sure.
Is that for the count?
Yes, that is for you.
Sure. That's a good question. So for Resilience Authority, depending on how you set it up, you can have
Can you
more or
talk
less
just a
control.
little louder, please?
Oh,
We're having
sure,
trouble in the
absolutely.
room.
For Resilience Authority, it depends on how you set it up.
My niece is there. I'm just in a sustainability commission meeting.
I'm a guest. You're a tenant. You take part
Can you
of
guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear
hear
you.
you.
Someone needed to mute. Please go ahead and continue, Councilman Conway.
Sure. So I think this is part of the question about how we set it up and what it means for our ability to control the projects that it focuses on. So as the other Resilience Authorities were considering setting up, one of the considerations was that they could keep it internal and have it be a government entity that has the Resilience Authority and so on and so forth. One of the downsides in that structure is that they wouldn't have been eligible for other pots of funding. Some pots of funding are exclusive to non-government entities like nonprofits or otherwise. And so they ultimately decided to go for a quasi-government entity that has, where the government maybe has influence. Maybe the board chooses the people who are, the mayor chooses the folks who are on the board, but they don't manage the day-to-day operations or exact projects that they choose. And so it gives up a little bit of control, but opens it up to the possibility of more money. If you kept it internal, this could be something that you just give to, for instance, to the Department of Public Works. The mayor can then determine, Department of Public Works, we're going to focus on these areas. The council could even weigh in on the Department of Public Works. So I think that's the difference. You have less control if you make it a quasi-government entity.
And just to add to Councilman Conway's comments, I do want to put the idea of a Resilience Authority in context. The state of Maryland passed legislation enabling local governments to set up resilience authorities within the past few years. This is a relatively new structure, and so in terms of what the long-term impact on climate action planning or climate mitigation or enhancing climate resilience for local governments or communities will be, we're still kind of learning what that'll look like. This is one tool or one approach that should be considered for Baltimore City, as well as other governments, other jurisdictions across the state of Maryland, for how we enhance and how we achieve the goals that we have already outlined in our sustainability plan, in our climate action plan, as well as our disaster preparedness plan and other climate related plans across the city. So thank you so much, Councilman Conway, for outlining some of those goals and some of the aspirations for what a resilience authority could do. But we want to put that in the context to manage expectations for folks, and with the understanding that it is something that is kind of in concept form right now. We don't know what the how the process will unfold just yet.
So I think also what's helpful to know is, and I think the $20 billion that was announced on Friday by the Biden-Harris administration is an excellent example of this. That $20 billion will be broken out into a portion that is squarely focused on governments, state and local governments, and then there's going to be a portion of it that strictly goes to private entities. And so the idea that they have is that these would go to like kind of like community banks or CDC type organizations, for which the Resilience Authority would sort of fit that model they would like to. And this is all in questioning and how you structure it. The ultimate piece here is, how does the city position itself to be eligible for as much money as possible? And right now, there is no clear entity that is focused on resilience outside of the city working on this problem. So if you created that entity, you could therefore be eligible for those additional dollars. Once again, something like this needs to be considered in a broader scheme of the city's priorities and how it wants to tackle the problem and how it thinks it can get its hands on as much money as possible to see its priorities through.
Thank you. We're going to take one more question. We're going to try and keep it brief because we need to get on to the next part of the agenda. Omar, you've had your hand raised. We can't hear you.
Omar, perhaps you can type your question in the chat because we are not able to hear you. All right, and we'll go ahead and then, in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next section of the agenda, and I'll pass it back to you, Miriam and Mia, to facilitate that. And for these next two sections, we are going to wait to the end to take questions just because we're running out of time.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so as I introduced before, we're talking about buried streams and urban flooding. We're going to be hearing from Joanna Birch, who's the floodplain manager here in the Office of Sustainability. Oh, I'm sorry. We're hearing from Kim Grove, who's the chief of the Office of Research and Environmental Protection of DPW. And then we're going to be hearing from Councilman Burnett of the 8th District and Councilwoman Odette Ramos of the 14th District about priorities and actions in their districts. So take it away, Kim.
Hey, good evening. I am going to try and share my screen, hopefully. Just one moment. Okay, are you able to see this presentation? So I'm sort of, can I get a yes?
Yes, it is not in presentation mode though.
And I'm probably, I'll try and do it, but there have been issues earlier today. Are you able to see it in presentation mode, or does it need to switch over for the settings? Do you see a full screen?
No, we just see the slides on the side and.
Okay, how about this? Now can you see it?
Same, it hasn't changed.
Yeah,
but
so we're gonna go back to the other way. We're just gonna have to deal, we'll make it this way, a little bit easier. Okay. So good evening. My name is Kim Grove, and I am the Chief of the Office of Research and Environmental Protection for the Department of Public Works. I have also served as the city's MS4 permit manager since I started with the city back in 2010. The MS4 is the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It is our permit from the state that allows us to discharge our water through the public storm sewer system. Baltimore City is very unusual in that we are a city of a certain age that is fully regulated as separated sewers. A lot of other cities like DC, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, portion of that city has combined sewers. That means when it rains, that water is going to mix in with the wastewater. And we don't have that issue, but we have a lot of other challenges to deal with. Today, we're going to talk a bit about buried streams, and I am trying to do both the presentation or some of the topics that I was going to talk about, as well as what Joanna was going to present. So just bear with me. One of the biggest things to talk through is there's different types of flooding. There's riverine flooding, meaning the water is coming out from a stream. There's tidal flooding, which if you live along the Fells Point, you may have to endure that. That means the water is rising and coming up, maybe during a storm, or if you were around for Hurricane Isabel, we had a tidal surge that happened after the rain was done. But today we want to talk about pluvial flooding. Some other folks may call it overland flooding. And that's basically flooding that isn't related to an open waterway. And it's or a water body. And it can come because of two things. Either one, too much rain is happening at one time, or the second one, there's not enough capacity in the system to convey that water. And that capacity could be an issue of just the pipes are too small, or the inlets aren't sized for the amount of rain that's coming down, or those inlets and those pipes might be clogged, or as we saw in 2018, when we had so much back-to-back rain, the soils themselves got really saturated and you started to see flooding. Now, some of the problems that we may have with pluvial flooding is what actually makes a flood. Is it just water in the roadway, or is it when it is actually causing damage and creating risk to the people using that roadway? One of the other things is that it can be very difficult to predict and not as easy to model that comes in. So we have a lot of different resources. We do actually have mapped all of our historic streams. We have data related to repetitive loss. And then we also have flooding information, and we are trying to build a more comprehensive flood repository, building on information, whether it's reports that have come into the different agencies or called in by 311. NOAA keeps a storm events database. And then there's also a MyCoast app where users can go ahead and upload photos that are time and date stamped. It was originally developed for just coastal flooding, but they have added applications to allow pluvial flooding to be recognized. There's also active communications done by the Office of Sustainability. So the Office of Sustainability actually has the responsibility for floodplain management and doing these communications. There are two types. There's annual mailings that go out to properties that are in the special flood hazard area, or that what's known as the regulated floodplain, for which basically says there's a 1% chance that flooding is going to occur from that stream or waterway. You'll notice that I am now talking about a 1%. If you've heard in the past something like a 10-year storm or a 100-year storm, what's been realized is that has been really confusing terminology. I am not old, but I am also not so young. But I will say I have encountered several 100-year storms. I've even encountered a 500-year storm, and yet I can tell you I am not that old. It is that these storms have a 1%, or in the case of a 500-year storms, that means it's a 0.2% chance of happening. That may seem like a really small type of probability, but like many others who are listening on this call, we may know the probability, we may know the odds are against us. I, for one, am still going to go buy me a Powerball ticket because those jackpots are up so high. So coming back on the communications, we do those annual mailings to, Office of Sustainability does the mailings to the special flood hazard. And then there's also annual mailings for repetitive loss. And those mailings are basically letting those property owners know what they can do to help reduce the risk, what resources they have available. And then there's also just other information related to the services that the city provides. This is just a visual for you. On the left-hand side, all the little light blue, those are all of the historic streams that used to exist in Baltimore City. And this came from a study done by Johns Hopkins that basically looked at old topographic maps and just backtracked where those networks were. The blue lines, the dark blue lines, are the streams that exist now. And you will notice that the dark blue lines are so fewer than those light blue lines. Didn't mean that those light blue lines went away. They just got piped. I often will talk about how Baltimore City is a city that's been built on the water. It's not just that we are a port city. It is that for us to be able to grow as a city, to build as a city, we had to pipe those waterways. And at the beginning of the 1900s, this wasn't a greedy choice of developers. This was actually a very smart choice based on public health to separate the community from waterborne diseases. So just realizing we have a lot of waterways, they are piped. It doesn't mean also that the stream or the flow of that stream that may have been occurring in the early 1900s, that flow rate, that amount of water is the same amount of water coming through the pipes. We're really carrying just those headwaters in there, but it does let us know where some of the groundwater may be accumulating. So I like to use also the term that our streets are our streams, to just reiterate to people that there is still a lot of water that is flowing in and around Baltimore City, not just the drinking water, but also, that the storm drain pipes are still providing a service, even though it may not be raining. And over here on the right, this is one that Councilwoman Ramos is very familiar with. This is the area around Lake Montebello. This is the intersection of 35th and Hillen, which has had a lot of work and studies done related to the flooding that happens at this intersection. This intersection is basically the bottom of a bowl that receives stormwater runoff from about 800 acres of land. The large pipe that comes down here and then comes around the lake, that is actually carrying a historic stream known as Tiffany Run. So it really is, and you can see this dotted line. This is where the stream used to go, and then it also crossed where Lake Montebello is at. So for us to create the lake, which is a washwater lake for our drinking water, we had to move that lake, basically we had to pipe it and move it up around the lake. But one thing, if you were to look at our regulated floodplain, there's no regulated floodplain that is associated with it. However, we do have a lot of occurrences for flooding that occurs not only within the roadway, but also within the residential homes that are in this block area. Also, there's Mervo High School is right here. They also can see flooding that can reach up along Hillen. So this is just one more graphic of the types of data that we have that the Office of Sustainability has using GIS, where you can see where repetitive loss areas are versus areas that will be having or within 100 feet of your 1% floodplain. So going into the future, what else can we be doing? And when I say we, this is a collective effort of multiple city agencies working together. First and foremost, what we're trying to do is start to identify those properties that have been impacted by pluvial flooding and get annual mailings out to them. We recognize that communications has to come in many different ways. So in addition to those mailings, there's also going to be looking at how the enhancement of our websites as well as social media can be used. We're also looking at what we can expand in making available for GIS information to the public, as well as information related to our flood alert system. Our flood alert system is a series of stream gauges and rain gauges throughout the city that is real time, and it's web-based, and it's used by DPW, DOT, and the Office of Emergency Management, so that during a rainstorm, we can see where there is a potential that flooding may be happening, so we can get emergency services out there even quicker. what we want to do, not only in enhancing that system, which we just got the contract approved to upgrade the system. We also want to look at where we can add sensors for flooding that's happening in the roadway, not just within the streams. Other opportunities are flagging properties with repetitive loss and looking at the potential of also including those for floodplain review, floodplain management review during the permitting process. Baltimore City DPW started developing a full model of the hydraulic and hydrologic, or H&H model of the storm drain system. This is very, very key. What this model does is it allows us to see for any type of storm that we want to load in there. We can see how the water will not only go into the system and or, you know, if it makes it into the system, if it has to be sitting up on the roadway, how over time, how often, what kind of storm would actually make it to any of the buildings and possibly flood that roadway. But we can also use it to make decisions on how we may take remedial actions for it. A lot of times in the past, what we would do is we create this model, but only on a small scale. So for instance, we have this type of model for 35th and Hillen, but it's just for that small drainage area. By making the investment to do this citywide, we can see it as a whole system, not just different parts. And DPW already has a similar model for the drinking water system and for the wastewater system. It's just that stormwater has been historically underfunded and didn't have that investment before, but we are doing this proactively. Finally, we're just continuing to look for grants and loans to implement the remedial actions that we've started to, for areas that we've already identified. And those actions are both a combination of green, which is anything from adding more forests and trees, to gray, which could be a tank, a storage tank, or a larger pipe. Looking also at policies for pluvial flooding, and how development may be happening, or what kind of controls developers would have to put in if there is a higher risk. And then finally, looking at potentially acquiring properties that are hazardous and, you know, have a greater risk of flooding, so that once obtained, it would be maintained as open space. And so those are just a few future steps. And if you've got more questions and or ideas related, if it has to deal with floodplain management, or what the city is trying to do with the community rating system with the National Flood Insurance Program, Joanna Birch is your person. If you do have questions, though, related to DPW's efforts in trying to reduce flooding and the H&H model, then I would be your person. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive overview. You did it. And for stepping in for Joe Birch, who was not able to make it today. I really appreciate that. So now we're going to hear from our council members, Christopher Burnett and Odette Ramos. So I'd ask you to stick to like as close to 5 minutes as you possibly can. And I'm not sure what order you want to take that in. I think, why don't we have you go first, Councilman Burnett? I know you have sort of a case study for us. Okay, it looks like maybe
Can you hear me?
Great.
Hey, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, early evening. Councilman Burnett, I represent the 8th Council District, and just want to thank the Commission for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for the invite. Much appreciated, and for your partnership. I've worked pretty closely with many of you in this work as we try to, help with the continued recovery along the Frederick Avenue corridor, which was subject to 2 100-year storms back to back in 2018, one in May, one in July of 2018, and both very devastating floods. At the same time, as we saw flooding, inland flooding in Ellicott City and in other parts of my district in like the Dickeyville Forest Park area as well. And it was, it's the recovery's been a very lengthy, multi-year effort. But I think it's a really good example of interagency collaboration, as well as working in lockstep with community. We essentially never stopped meeting and on a regular basis from 2018 to now. We have bi-monthly meetings with residents to keep them updated on the status of the recovery in a very transparent way, from funding application status, things that can be immediately implemented, providing direct feedback opportunities on some of the measures that we've taken along the Frederick Avenue corridor. And so that's been a really good partnership with the Planning Department, Department of Public Works, Department of Transportation, and our local sustainability hubs, Still Meadow Community Fellowship Church, which from the first 100-year flood in May stepped up to be an amazing community partner, not only formally working in collaboration with the city as a sustainability hub, where they've now retrofitted their church to have refrigeration, solar panel charging stations, cots for people to sleep over. There are a few food distribution site, and they're also active participants in the mitigation efforts through tree planting and other efforts on their own property to reduce stormwater runoff from the nearby forested area and their large parking lot. We've done a lot of direct outreach to community residents as well, and that's been, again, a great partnership across multiple agencies to literally go canvassing door to door along the Frederick Avenue area in Beachfield, and talking to residents about the flooding efforts, making sure they are aware of the meetings that are taking place, pushing people to sign up for the Red Alert program so they can get updates along the way, getting them to sign up for our email list so that they can get, if they can't make the meetings, that they're getting the meeting minutes and other resources that are available to them. We've done resource fairs. I mean, it really has been a collaborative effort that I think really shows what can be possible when government is working in lockstep with community, listening to the community, taking that direct feedback, but also just remaining consistent the entire time. So that there hasn't really been a drop off in communication to residents, as well as the effort to do things like expanding the capacity of the culvert system there, improving signage and alert systems, as well as retention walls. I mean, it's been a lot along the way and more to come. And so I just wanted to have an opportunity. Want to say thank you to all of you who've been a part of this process along the Frederick Avenue corridor, because I've got nothing but great feedback from our community residents, but also just to really spotlight what's happening in Southwest Baltimore as we, continue to grapple with is our new reality, where these storms are becoming more frequent, more deadly and more serious, and the work that we have to do has to really be multifaceted in a multi-agency approach. And so wanted to just lift up that work. And I know that my colleague, Councilmember Ramos, has been doing similar work, so I guess I'm supposed to hand it off to her as well.
Thank you so much for giving us the view from where you are and all this good work that's happening. Really appreciate that. Councilwoman Ramos, bring us home.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity. My colleague really has been at the forefront of this as well. So what we're doing, Kim Grove talked a little bit about some of the work that's been going on for dealing with the flooding on 35th and Hillen. But let me just paint a picture for you first, okay? The flooding that has been happening on 35th and Hillen, right by Mervo and the Lake Montebello, I have a picture from 1957 of the same exact flooding that the residents have shown me. And there are residents who've been there for a long time that have suffered through this flooding, messed up basements, property damage, car damage, injuries from being stuck in the car, all of that stuff. So I'm really grateful for the Scott administration and this work that DPW is doing to actually pay attention to this huge issue. And I also want to acknowledge Delegate Boyce and the 43rd District delegation did get an additional $5 million to help us start up the work that needs to be done to finally address this issue for the residents on 35th Street. So what, as Kim Grove said, there was a big study done, this H&H study, but even before then, Sherrod Hicks at DPW and some of his colleagues had to go and make sure that, and look at every single inlet in that 800, 700 acre area, because the map that they had before we started this project still had Memorial Stadium on it. Many of you are younger than me, so I'll have to remind you that this was 30 years ago that Memorial Stadium actually existed, right? So redoing all of the maps, where the inlets were, what condition they were in, was absolutely part of this work. And then we did a huge community effort to figure out what the ultimate solution would be. And DPW and their team put together 10 options for the residents to pick from. And what was super interesting about this is that there were some solutions that were small, solutions, smaller short-term solutions like, alarms so that people wouldn't drive through the flooding or things like that. And the community was very clear. We are going to get this done. We are going to get this done right. And we don't want to have any more flooding at all. So what we've done, we picked a couple of things. One is, first of all, knowing that any infrastructure project to correct this issue was going to take a few years, we flood-proofed the residents' basements. And DHCD was a huge part of making that happen. The second piece is, again, with all of this study and work that was done, worked with the community to figure out what was going to be the best solution for the infrastructure project. So as Kim talked about, there is a river running underneath 35th Street, the Tiffany Run. The pipe is huge already. It's 108 inches. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, because, sometimes inches and feet. Okay. And so we could dig up the pipe and make a bigger one. But one of the things that's brilliant about our water, sewer, wastewater system, stormwater system, is that there is redundancy in the system, which basically means there's additional pipes here and there if something isn't working right? And I can go on and on about the sinkhole. We're not going to do that. So with the residents, we worked with the residents, and Windermere, which is the street just south, residents agreed, okay, we'll put a pipe on Windermere. We're going to dig up Windermere, put an additional pipe. So we have 2 pipes that are going to be working on getting that water out of there. But then in the long term, working on a pipe project to capture the water further up this is a longer term. So it's a multifaceted, multi-year approach to this in terms of the infrastructure project. But it really, my background is in housing, so I've learned a ton. I know, a lot about, I'm working on learning so much more about the flooding issue. But it's really a big deal because the floods are going to get worse. And I think we've actually avoided a flood this year with all the rain because of what's happening at the sinkhole is that we've got pumps that are pumping the water through a lot quicker. And so, but that's not going to be there forever. So this infrastructure project is really critical. And if I can touch on one piece that Kim mentioned, that I'm seriously looking at is I was able to look at all of the data that the Sustainability Office produced, because we had asked the question, where is the pluvial flooding happening? Where? And what's going on in those areas? Well, we figured out, based on the analysis, that the pluvial flooding, a lot of it is happening where the rivers have been piped, right? And we can't unpipe the rivers. Actually, that was an option that we were thinking about for 35th Street. Well, not going to happen. But we can work to see where are the vacant lots that are already existing in the areas where there's flooding? And can we make sure that they are never developed? And so looking at, and the data that the planning department or the Office of Sustainability has is amazing, because it actually shows where the vacant lots are, how forested they are already, and what more we can, and that way we can figure out how many more trees need to be planted as well. It's not going to solve the problem, but it would help mitigate the harm of increased flooding. So what I've been thinking about is that we would actually create a new zoning layer that would be flood mitigation zoning layer, which would say if we are zoning these lots and properties, and we're not kicking people out, but if we're zoning these lots and properties as flood mitigation, they can never ever be changed to be able to develop on them. And then the second thing would be, where those are already city owned, go ahead and start moving that process. But where they might be privately owned, if they're ready for the in-rem process to foreclose on the high liens, or if we have to use eminent domain to be able to acquire them. So those are some things. I haven't had a chance to fully flesh all of this out. But at least something to be able to help mitigate the impact, because the flooding is going to get worse. There's just not a question about it. And so if we're able to forest all of these various lots and make sure that people are not moving in those areas that would cause more harm, then at least we do a little bit to mitigate the issue. So I wanted to mention that if folks are interested in exploring that a little bit more, we have the data. It is amazing. I did share this with the state and with OEM, who'd been working with some emergency management stuff with us, and they were super excited about it and could potentially, draw in some money to help us out with this. So anyway, there's a lot going on in this front in the city, and it's really exciting that the leadership of DPW and the work that DPW is doing is saying, like, let's solve this problem. So we can certainly use the commission's help to sort of make sure we're in the right, moving in the right direction, but also just keeping tabs with you about the policy piece, as well as just what's happening in Councilman Burnett and my district on the infrastructure side to try to address all of this. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. And I have to say, I'm really very impressed by the highly consultative process with residents to figure out how to address the flooding. There's nothing like trying to fix any problem, and having the constituents angry at you because you're tearing up the street, and having people identify what they feel was best is both very respectful and prevents a lot of trouble. So it's excellent in both ways. And I'm going to hand this back to Mia. I think it'll be easier for her to see what needs to happen from her vantage within the WebEx.
Sure, thank you. So at this point, I want to open it up for any commissioners that might have questions of our guests. Please help me out here, commissioners, come up with something.
All right, so you guys might have talked about this a little bit with the warning systems and maps that are publicly available now. So is there something like open data where someone could either see when they're looking to purchase a home or even rent a home, just the likelihood, like a flood map? I know the federal government makes something like that available. Is there something like that that could be available to just constituents generally? So if they're very likely to have a flood and let's say don't know, that could be better communicated to them. I mean, I think the city does a pretty good job of this already, but I know that there has to be some resources or some research involved in getting the most current data, as you guys have touched on.
So there are maps of the regulated floodplain, and that is related to that tidal flooding and riverine. As far as pluvial, not at this time, because it's so complex of why the flooding may have occurred. So you could have reports of flooding at a certain intersection only to find, well, reason why that happened is that's an area where there tends to be a lot of littering, so that the inlets are usually done. And they may have reports, there might be a lot of 311 requests for flooded streets. However, when they're saying it's a flooded street, that water is still like only in the parking lane. It wasn't a full flooded street. We started looking at flooded street requests a little while ago, and we saw this huge spike in 2018, only to realize that was during that really cold winter when we were having a lot of water main breaks. So it was unrelated to that. There are certain services that are out there that have tried to show where flooding is going to be done, and some real estate agents have used that. But I can't verify the authenticity. I can tell you that the struggles we've gone through in just trying to set up our H&H model for a couple pilot locations, that is a very intense, in-depth amount of work to be done. So I can't say whether or not how accurate some of those services are. One thing I've appreciated, though, is the State Highway Administration has produced a vulnerability map, and you can ask for certain storms where the roadways may show that they could be flooding. However, that kind of information does not translate into the actual property. So they'll identify, like, here's some of the roadway that might be done, but not necessarily here's this block of homes they may be seeing it, especially if the water is getting in through the basement in some way. So we're just trying to peel into some of the, there is a 311 request for water in the basement, but we're trying to go through that information more and more to understand how much of that is related to storms. And even during the storms, is that related to backup in the sewer system, or is that related to water coming in through there? One thing I can tell you, and this is something I really appreciate where Miriam was talking about, talking with the community, is not just their ideas of how to help, but also to understand their trauma and their fear and their experiences. This comes into play a lot with insurance. We have had community members who said, I didn't want to report to the insurance anymore because I didn't want to lose my insurance. I didn't want to lose my premium. I didn't want to make a claim because I didn't know how to do the process. And so from an equity standpoint, there are things that the city is going to be working on for improving the infrastructure and minimizing the vulnerability of those communities. But we're also realizing that processes need to be understood as well. And I will have to say, we've had a really good partner in the Maryland Insurance Agency. Especially if we've had certain events, they have shown up to make sure that people know what their rights and resources are if they have been impacted. But it's going to be a long road we need to get to. Yeah, so that's basically it. So to answer your question, I don't think there's enough information to be saying it. But that would be something that could be worthwhile. I think it's a little bit of a sticky part, though, because if we start to put it out there and say, hey, there's this risk for this home, it's very easy to say when you're in a regulated floodplain because it's related to a stream. If it's something else, we've got to have a better understanding of what is the basis of that information. But it's an idea worth considering.
Although we do have neighbors like Ms. Jackson and Ms. Llewellyn that will make it their business,
yes,
to let people know what they're getting into. I mean,
yes,
they look, if somebody's house is for sale, they're going to keep track and they're going to go talk to people. That's just
right.
Yep.
And I do have to, the Department of Housing and Community Development has some data, but I think there's the real concern when it's not just the flooding of the building or the home, it's really about the mold that might be there. And so that's the part where I think our two agencies could work a little bit more in trying to better understand that and those risks that can come into play.
Thank you.
Kimberly, just one quick question on the insurance process. Hear you loud and clear on some of the barriers there. I know that FEMA has done some work in the last few years to really think about how to better expedite the insurance process and also to make sure that there aren't undue penalties. Is there anything that we can learn from what's happening at the federal level to make this easier for community members? Because at the end of the day, we do want them to be able to use the insurance that they're paying for, but we don't want the process to be burdensome or for that to be a deterrent to living in a community.
Right. That one I can't answer as well, because when it comes to insurance, that's more of Joanna's side of thing and understanding. So I will defer that, and maybe she can be able to answer that and respond back through there. But yeah, I think overall, like any of the claims processes, it is, there's always opportunities to look at how can we get into the action to the response side so we can shorten that recovery time that comes into play. Yeah.
If I may, the other question, however, is do these insurance, because of where they're living, they may not actually offer flood insurance.
Right.
Right? Because along the regulated floodplain, those all get flood insurance. But if it's not in the regulated floodplain, they may not. So that's the issue with, in my area where they were not offered flood insurance. Now that's changed a little bit on the federal level. If I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, because we just passed in the council last year, the regulated floodplain map, with the understanding that there's a certain amount of feet from a regulated floodplain that could still is required to have flood insurance. But that didn't reach Helen and 35th, and it didn't reach. So there's that larger issue around, it's not the requirement to have flood insurance, it's you get a discount on the flood insurance, excuse me. But it's still an issue in terms of whether or not they're going to get coverage for that.
Right. And you actually bring up a really good point. From FEMA's perspective, flooding, it's for whatever reason, they still have a lot of focus on regulated floodplains. So it's a little tougher to get the pluvial side into there.
And just to clarify, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Councilwoman Ramos, you can in fact buy flood insurance even if you live outside of the floodplain. That is a possibility. That's sometimes a misconception. But yeah, it's a matter of who necessarily through the city's community rating system, considering that we maintain a Class 5 rating system, flood insurance holders, they receive a 25% discount on their flood insurance policies. And so,
right, I corrected myself there. It's the discount, so I appreciate that. Yeah,
anyone can sign up and receive flood insurance, but acknowledging that it can be rather expensive, and there can be some significant cost burdens for many households.
Are there any other questions? Ava, you have your hand raised, but I'm not sure if that was
from just
the last point. Okay, fantastic. Well, this has been a really great conversation about so many things, and I'm sure that your mind might be blown with all of the data and information that was shared with us. So thank you all for sharing this with us. This is a form, of course, of community engagement. And thank you to those who joined this meeting, and we'll hopefully let people know that there'll be an edited version of the meeting. It probably might miss all the fun and games at the beginning when we had a little bit of a rain delay, but it'd be you have witnessed a historic moment here. I'd like to thank Councilwoman Ramos, Councilman Burnett, Councilman Conway for joining us today and sharing the case studies and letting us know what they're working on. Ava, as always, thank you for the work that you and your office does to make sure that Baltimore is moving forward in all things related to ensuring that we are upholding people, place, prosperity, and planet. And Miriam, thank you for your service on this commission. It has been an honor to work with you all this time, and I look forward to the future of the commission as well, and all that you're going to be doing. It's going to be great, I'm sure. For the next steps for the commission, we will the office will send our recommendation to the mayor's office for approval, and then we will work on planning and seeing what we bring before the entire commission in the future. So it's about 5:54, I think. So just a few minutes to spare. Our next meeting will be in August. So I think, if I am wrong, someone please let me know. So August 16th at 4 o'clock. And at this point, we can't tell you whether it's going to be hybrid or not, but you know that we will have a WebEx link ready for you to go. And we will have an update on agenda items in the near future. So thank you all for coming today. Jared Lyles, is that what you want me to say? Miriam?
What I'm saying is we started a voting process at the beginning of the meeting, and I know you've been looking at that. And if you want to fill us in, if there's a consensus of opinion.
So there is a consensus of opinion. We have a majority vote to make a recommendation to the mayor, and that is what we will do through the office. Fantastic. Thank you all. So hopefully I will have a co-chair. Please, Mr. Mayor. Otherwise, whew, we're going to be in for some fun, y'all. So with that, I'd like to adjourn this July meeting of the commission.